Now that I've reviewed the entire Thorn trilogy, it's time to get into Halloween H20 20 years later. Now before I get into the review though, remember to subscribe if you're not already and hit the bell icon so you never miss an upload. Not only was H20 celebrating the 20th anniversary of Halloween, but it also brought back Jamie Lee Curtis to play Laurie Strode for the first time since Halloween 2. It has such an awesome intro. It doesn't really compare to Halloween 4 because let's be honest, that's never gonna happen, but it feels like fall, it has a nice amber color grade, and there's not a mountain in sight. I can't believe I'm saying this, but maybe California was a better place to shoot than Utah all along. Right out of the gate, we have a reference to the original movie. Marion Chambers, who's the nurse from the very beginning of Halloween, is back, and she's still played by Nancy Stevens. Having Tommy Doyle, a whole new Strode family, and Dr. Wynn in Halloween 6 was way too much. But having a little nod like this that actually plays into the plot shows cleverness and restraint. I like it. If only Paul Rudd could have gone out like this. It turns out that Michael has been lying dormant for the past 20 years, but on a hunch he breaks into Marion's house to find out if Laurie is still alive and where he can find her. Like I mentioned earlier, the direction during this entire sequence is on point, and I love this shot of her screaming for help in the neighbor's house while the cops are looking around at her doorstep. Something that always bothered me though about this movie is that it's supposed to pick up after Halloween 2. There's a montage at the beginning that shows Laurie in a wheelchair and a newspaper clipping, and it says she's the sole survivor of that Halloween night, which means they're going with the ending where Loomis blew himself and Michael up. Now, I'll be the first to admit that that's a smart and easy way to deal with Donald Pleasance's untimely death, but why is Michael clean masked and burn free? It's not like the Thorn trilogy went the extra mile or anything, but they had his hands all scarred up at least, and missing a detail like that is a bizarre oversight. A lot of you guys pointed out that there was a terrible sound alike for Dr. Loomis during the intro montage back when they announced that the new Halloween will have one, and you were not lying. This guy sounds nothing like Donald Pleasance. Why didn't they just use voiceover from the other 6 movies? They even included lines from the other ones. It's just weird. After the intro sequence, we find out that the rest of the movie takes place in California. And even though it loses the fall feel from that point forward, I thought this was an interesting change for the series. In this timeline, Laurie faked her death and changed her name, so moving to California to start a new life for herself seems logical. Good job, writing department. She's now the headmaster of a boarding school, and she has a son named John, which is a cool nod to the horror master himself. I find it kind of funny that they drop a line about her baby daddy being a meth addict because in the new movie, she's the addict and she's the one who lost her daughter. That's not to say she doesn't have trauma of her own though. Even though she started over, she's still affected by what she went through in 1978, and since it's Halloween, all those memories come rushing back. She of course deals with it through medication and good old booze. I like the idea that Michael doesn't have money for gas, so he just steals another car at a rest stop on his cross-country road trip. I wonder what station he listened to. Probably hard classic rock. Michael always struck me as a Sabbath guy. John's plotline is kind of whatever, but basically his school is going on a trip to Yosemite and Laurie won't let him go because she's scared to let him out of her sight on Halloween. She eventually relents, but by that point it's revealed that John has this whole plan to have a special date night with his girlfriend at the school, so it always felt weird to me that he even argued with Laurie in the first place. There is a ton of plot setup going on in the first and second acts where Michael goes to Meredith's house to figure out where Laurie moved to and then stealing the Jeepers Creepers truck to stalk her. I appreciate it after the Thorn trilogy, but the plot really drags, especially for a movie that doesn't even clear 90 minutes. Hell, after the intro, you barely even see Michael for the first half of the movie. If this lady looks familiar, it's because she's Jamie Lee Curtis's mom, Janet Leigh. The line about her being maternal for a moment is a little cringy, but then she turns around and gets in the same car from Psycho, while the iconic music cue kicks in, so subtlety was obviously not the goal, and I can forgive it. The biggest problem with H20, in my opinion, is how it's absolutely full of cheap jump scares. The absolute worst one is when Laurie sees Michael walking toward her and she closes her eyes and opens them, but he's still there. That would be the perfect way to reintroduce her with Michael, but it turns out to be her boyfriend. I realize now that this movie was right on the cusp of cheap, pointless jump scares being thrown in to stop you from zoning out becoming the norm. Once Michael gets to the school, things really kick off. He goes after John and his friends, which results in some pretty cool kills. I especially like when he cuts the rope and the dumbwaiter drops down on Sarah's leg. The makeup work on her busted leg and the stab wound is awesome, and she says exactly what the audience is thinking. Then, almost immediately after, John and Molly follow the trail of blood to her body and flip on the light to one of the best displays in the entire franchise. Letting you see that light bulb lit up through her countless stab wounds was a nice touch. The reintroduction of Michael and Laurie is pretty damn underwhelming in my opinion. He just shows up in the window and she doesn't even look shocked. And now is the perfect time to talk about the mask. It is still so bad. It changes throughout the movie, which is somehow a trend this late in the game, and there's not much more to say other than it's disappointing. Michael's build is a big big improvement though. He's back to looking like a normal guy rather than a Kane Hodder-sized beast. Captain Dumbass tries to save the day and ends up killing LL Cool J, which sucks since he's actually pretty great, but then Michael comes up behind him and does the classic knife lift, so it's kind of like instant karma for him. The last sequence of this movie honestly makes it easy to forgive a lot of the prior goofiness in the plot though. Once Laurie is sure her kid is safe, she goes after Michael with a fucking fire axe and beats the ever-living shit out of him. I still wasn't old enough to see this movie in theaters when it came out, but man, it must have been so fulfilling to see Michael take such an insane beating from none other than Laurie Strode after 20 years of sloppy bullshit. It reminds me of how good the Walking Dead comic got once Rick and his crew realized that fear was holding them back, and that once they started believing in themselves as survivors, they became a force to be reckoned with. Oh wait, LL Cool J isn't dead. Hell yeah, instant karma revoked. They try to pull that classic cliffhanger of Michael being loaded into a coroner's van in a body bag at the end, but in a last second twist that genuinely made me cheer the first time I saw it, Laurie steals the van, slams on the brakes, and sends Michael through the windshield before running him over and conveniently pinning him to a fallen tree after rolling down an embankment. And then for good measure, she cuts his fucking head off with the axe. H20 is the perfect example of one of those movies that's just good enough that when you go see it in theaters, you have a total blast, but as time goes on, the cracks start to show and it doesn't hold up as well as you thought it would. Shifting the power from Michael to Laurie was a great idea, but honestly, this movie is almost never scary and it verges on being an action movie at points, which is a bummer if you ask me. Despite its flaws though, I really like the idea of definitively ending the series for once by having Laurie cut off Michael's head with a fire axe and definitively killing Michael Myers. That was a pretty bold move, and even though they didn't stick with it, I respect the choice at the time. It sucks that the mask is so bad and it drags in the first half, but Halloween 4 had very similar problems in my opinion, and people, myself included, look back on that one very fondly, so it's easy to see why other people hold H20 in such a high regard. It did a lot right, it just didn't totally stick the landing if you ask me. But that's all I have to say about Halloween H20 20 years later. If you liked the video, let me know down in the comments below, and I will see you sometime next week for my review of Halloween Resurrection. Anyways guys, my name is Jimmy Champane, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.